Good evening to y'all. We warmly invite you to dive back into the second part of our epic story about the mysterious underwater city. Together with Michelle, the highly skilled commander of the elite special unit known as Underwater Horizon, you will now set out on a very special and dangerous mission into the deep. Get into bed under your blanket and get ready for a wonderful night's sleep. When you're ready, close your eyes. A soft, warm golden light gently illuminated Michelle's face as she slowly woke up. For a brief, quiet moment, she completely forgot exactly where she was. It felt to her as if, upon opening her eyes, she would see a white, sandy beach all around, seagulls circling in the sky, and turquoise waves washing up on the shore. But she wasn't actually standing on a sunny beach. Instead, she was located nearly 2 full kilometers deep beneath the dark surface of the vast Atlantic Ocean. That shimmering, radiant golden glow wasn't actually natural sunlight, but rather a complex system of powerful artificial illumination that had completely replaced the daylight deep within the submerged underwater city of Cremenis. Michelle got out of bed, walked over to the window, and, placing her hands on the windowsill, looked up at the glass dome that crowned the city of 3 million. The glowing sphere at the top of the dome illuminated the Gothic buildings visible from the window. The sphere looked so much like a real sun that she sometimes forgot she was underwater until she glanced up at the sky. Instead of clouds, there shimmered blue water full of ocean dwellers. As she got dressed, Michelle listened to the birdsong drifting in from outside the window. In fact, there were no birds outside. Their voices came from hidden speakers in the oak tree near the house. Michelle whistled along with them as she got ready for today's assignment. For the past 6 years, she had been steadily climbing the ranks of the special unit Underwater Horizon. Now she was its commander and was responsible for monitoring the flora and fauna in the biospheres around Cremenis. The underwater city, unique and the first of its kind, turned out to be a successful project and continued to develop, surpassing all expectations. Hundreds of brown algae plantations were planted around the city. Their long, slender stems rose up from the deep ocean floor in very dense rows, gently swaying back and forth with the light, rhythmic bottom current. Every single year, without fail, they were carefully harvested and then shipped out to various developing countries as an environmentally friendly and sustainable source of vital nutrients. Over the course of the last several decades, the 32 original founding states of Cremenis had established and developed their own agricultural farms in the immediate surrounding vicinity of the metropolitan city. Each farm provided itself with all the necessary resources and produced more energy than it consumed. In a few years, they would no longer need to import food from the surface world, and all of Cremenis' energy needs would be fully met by these biospheres. Michelle was not responsible for the operation of these farms. Responsibility for them lay with the Marine Agriculture Administration. The project she was working on went beyond these farms, beyond the rainbow-colored coral reefs surrounding the city and the massive underwater mountains nearly the size of Everest. In just 50 years of its existence, the underwater city of Cremenis had radically changed the entire world. During this revolution, more and more new biospheres were being built. In these bubble-shaped microworlds, landscapes, cities, and villages from all corners of the world were recreated. In less than an hour, Michelle can visit all 7 continents. She'll see giraffes in the African Serengeti ecoregion, ocelots in the Amazon rainforest, and snowy owls in the tundra of northern Canada. She'll be able to see 100-meter-tall sequoias, gardens of blooming cherry blossoms, and thickets of cacti from the most remote parts of the Sahara Desert. The prosperity of all these ecosystems was her only responsibility. Nichelle lived in a city district that was a replica of the Czech capital, Prague. Her apartment looked as if it had been built in the 19th century, although in reality, it was younger than Nichelle herself. She left her home and, locking the front door, looked up through the glass dome where a humpback whale was swimming by in the water above. He looked down through the glass at this strange new world. The giant lingered for a moment and then swam away into the distance. After him, a huge school of tiny luminescent fish swam up to the dome, shining like stars in the sky. As they moved, the fish formed all sorts of new constellations. They kept changing, covered the whole city, and then vanished completely. Nichelle walked along the cobblestone streets. A horse-drawn carriage with tourists passed by her, the tourists smiling and taking pictures of everything around them. The clatter of the horse's hooves echoed between the houses. She kept walking until she reached a narrow river with wild ducks lazily drifting along with the current. Crossing the river by a stone bridge, Nichelle found herself in one of Cremena's neighborhoods built in the most modern style. This was a part of a city modeled after Seoul, South Korea. Nichelle glanced at a tall glass building that tapered upward like a fish's tail. It stood out sharply against the backdrop of identical white residential towers. After moving a little away from the glass skyscraper, Nichelle walked through the Olympic Park, built by Kikram in 1988. At the exit of the park stood gates decorated with the image of the 5 Olympic rings. Beyond the gates, she saw a garden with endless rows of pink, yellow, and red roses. She could smell their fragrance even from a distance. Not far from the park was the headquarters of the Special Unit Underwater Horizon, a modern building shaped like a pyramid with a pond full of goldfish in front of the entrance. She walked along the edge of the pond and saw a large orange fish swimming in the shallow water. Every morning at 9 o'clock, Nichelle met with Captain Helena and received her assignment for the day. Helena had been leading their organization for the past 20 years. She wore her white hair, which reached down to the middle of her back, in a tight braid. The only hint that she had grown up in the hills of Portugal long before coming to Cremonas was the gold chain around her neck with a cork figurine of a rooster in red and green. "Today, I have a special assignment for you," the captain said as Nichelle entered the office. She handed Nichelle a thick envelope with a list of tasks. Nichelle reread the latest operational data. A diver had found a fragment of an unknown plant species on his suit. Captain Helena pointed to a transparent container with a leaf inside. Nichelle picked it up to get a better look at the contents. The leaf was thick and tough and looked like something between a cactus and an aloe. It seemed to change color depending on the angle you looked at it. At the very beginning, the leaf appeared to be a deep purplish red, then it gradually turned into a bright turquoise and finally shifted to a dark brownish orange color. Exactly where the plant had grown was unclear, but most likely it had come from the most remote biospheres far from the city. Nichelle slowly stepped out of the large office building and saw her 2 loyal assistants, Yakub and Niran, patiently waiting for her right by the edge of the scenic koi pond. The three of them had been working together for almost 2 years. Jakob had come to the underwater city from the Czech Republic. He was a smart young man, a specialist in bioengineering. His knowledge and talents played an important role in designing the biosphere around Criminus. Niren, on the other hand, was born here in the city after his parents moved here from Thailand many years ago. He became one of the first graduates of the Criminus Underwater Science and Technology University. Nichelle told her colleagues about their new mission. After discussing the plan to search for the new plant, they strolled among the quiet ponds and bonsai trees in the parks of the Tokyo district, filled with peace and tranquility. Nichelle often thought about how similar the districts of Criminus were to their counterparts on land. The only city on Earth she had seen was New York. She visited it as part of a school field trip. When Nichelle and her colleagues found themselves in Manhattan, she compared the replica district to the original city from her childhood memories. As far as she could remember, they were almost identical in atmosphere. The same brick apartments with spiral staircases, glowing pizzeria signs, and shining skyscrapers that made her feel like she was at the center of the world. They walked slowly past the iconic United Nations headquarters, a massive, towering, rectangular building that looked remarkably like a giant glass tablet standing perfectly upright. This historic UN headquarters had been officially located in the city of Criminus ever since the year 2350. It was moved to the completely and entirely neutral territory of the vast underwater city, which was one of the very few remaining locations on Earth that did not belong to any specific sovereign country. In fact, over the past few decades, the city had become a safe haven for several international organizations. As she walked past the Empire State Building with Niran and Yakub, Nichelle remembered her first arrival in Criminus. Her father was from Nairobi, Kenya, and her mother was from a small village in Ghana. They emigrated to Miami, Florida, where Nichelle lived until she was 16. That's when they flew to London to board a ferry with nearly 10,000 other passengers. On the massive ship, they sailed past Portugal and along the west coast of Africa. She could still remember the smell of salty air as she stood at the bow of the ship, looking out at the sparkling water that seemed to stretch on forever. During the journey, her parents told her stories about their childhood in Africa, which sparked her imagination. Finally, the outline of the island appeared on the horizon. When they finally came ashore, it felt exactly like they had landed somewhere in the tropical Caribbean. She vividly remembered the narrow streets filled with the rhythmic sounds of reggae music, local people basking in the warm midday sun on the outdoor restaurant terraces, and the mouth-watering smell of freshly cooked, delicious seafood. Her father said then that this wasn't really an island, but a floating port above the city of Criminus, where ships dock to let passengers off. The port is connected to the underwater city by several elevators that will take them below the surface. They spent the night in a floating hotel with underwater windows, through which Nichelle watched schools of tiny fish brightly shimmering as they changed direction. She was so excited to see the city that she could barely fall asleep that night. The next morning, Nichelle and her parents headed to the station in the center of the floating island. From the outside, the building looked like a large terminal with a gleaming glass roof. They carefully scanned their passports at the electronic exit counter. After the scanner beeped and the gates swung open, they slowly rode down a very long escalator toward the busy center of the station. After descending, they stepped out onto a platform that looked like a train station, but instead of tracks, there was an endless row of elevators. They found the elevator with the number listed on their ticket and pressed the down button, down toward their new life. Nichelle remembered how the elevator was plunged into darkness at first as it passed through the base of the floating island. She remembered clearly how nervous she was at that moment. What kind of strange new world was waiting for him below? Would she ever see the sun again? Would she find friends here? But the darkness gradually faded, replaced by the blue glow of the ocean. She remembered a small school of rainbow-colored fish, no bigger than her pinky, that briefly surrounded the descending elevator. They changed color like chameleons, and then, like sparks, scattered through the water. A curious dolphin with a sleek, pinkish body pressed its nose against the glass wall of the elevator where Nichelle had placed her hand. She laughed when the dolphin swam after the elevator as it continued to descend. The deeper they descended, the more magic the ocean revealed to them. They saw sea turtles twice the size of a person, a glowing octopus, and countless fish. Nichelle was almost certain that they might even encounter a mermaid here, with shimmering scales and flowing hair. She remembered how their elevator reached the bottom. The doors opened, and they stepped into the lobby of a building with a marble floor and gleaming lights on the ceiling. They had arrived in the underwater city. Outside, Nichelle realized that the building they had just exited was a replica of the Empire State Building, and all around them was a real New York. To her surprise, the underwater city was lit just as brightly as the world above in the middle of the morning. Lost in her memories, Nichelle and her assistants crossed a stone bridge over a pond with graceful white and black swans. They reached the tram stop and boarded a city tram, which took them to a neighborhood very reminiscent of Lisbon. The yellow light of the artificial sun illuminated the rusty rooftops of the houses. The melancholy sounds of fado, traditional Portuguese music, faded into the distance and fell silent as their tram continued its journey through different parts of the city. They slowly circled all the way around the massive Colosseum, then passed right by the famous Golden Arch, and finally saw the iconic Big Ben, whose heavy bells were loudly striking 10 o'clock in the morning. The tram kept heading toward the outskirts of the city, passed through the hustle and bustle of Shanghai, the ancient temples of Osaka, and stopped in Dakar, where Nichelle and her assistants got off. They headed toward the operations building of the Special Unit Underwater Horizon at the very end of the complex. In the airlock, a 3-seater yellow submarine with a blue stripe down the middle of its hull was waiting for them. Nichelle, Yakub, and Niran took their seats inside to set off in search of the mysterious plant. "We're setting off," Nichelle said, starting the engine. The airlock began to slowly fill with water. Finally, their submarine was completely submerged and, with the loud roar of the engine, headed out into the ocean. Fish darted everywhere in the turquoise water around them. A manta ray glided majestically past the front window. As it moved and turned, its flat body looked like a kite catching a stream of air. The manta ray swam away, and their submarine entered a huge school of black fish with neon blue fins. It was hard to guess how many there were, several thousand or millions. Each fish looked like a cell in a single giant organism. Nichelle guided the submarine around a purple coral reef, illuminated by sunbeams from the ocean surface. Countless tiny fish darted around the reef. Behind a branch of coral, Nichelle spotted a tiny clownfish. It was watching the submarine opening and closing its mouth. Michelle didn't know exactly which biosphere the new plant was growing in, but she guessed it was in one of the newest ones. During their search, they would visit several places with the highest chance of success. Each biosphere, like Cremonez, is covered with thick glass and precisely recreates a specific corner of Earth's world. Under each bubble-shaped glass dome lies the landscape or city of one of the 7 continents. They kept moving along the reef until they saw the first of these sparkling domes. It looked like an underwater snow globe with a piece of Australia inside. As they approached, the airlock automatically opened and they swam inside. The door closed behind them and the water noisily drained from the airlock, like from a giant kitchen sink. Michelle and her assistants climbed out of the submarine and entered the biosphere. Inside, they found themselves standing on a copper-colored sandy road that stretched far ahead. Along the road stood wooden farmhouses that looked like they were about to fall apart. In reality, they were less than a year old. They had been built that way on purpose to recreate the landscape of the Australian countryside. After walking a little further, they saw a buggy, a small off-road vehicle for driving over rough terrain. They quickly got in and sped down the long, bumpy dirt road, leaving massive clouds of thick dust behind them. All around them were vast, endless fields of tall, dry, golden grass, which were filled with the incredibly loud chirping of crickets and the constant rhythmic buzzing of various other insects. They suddenly came across a large wild kangaroo, which hopped gracefully over the thick bushes and then stopped to watch them curiously as they slowly drove by. The sky around them turned green from a flock of budgerigars, which chirped together and landed on the bank of the muddy river to drink. The SUV drove up to the top of a rocky hill with a lookout point, and the team got out of the car. Michelle crouched down and took a soil sample, placing it in a special bag. She would take it to the laboratory in Cremonez for analysis of its microorganism content. Apparently, this ecosystem was actively developing. The only thing that set it apart from real Australia was the dark blue sky, filled with fish and marine plants instead of fluffy white clouds. A gentle breeze from the She would like to find out someday and see how closely this simulated biosphere resembles the original. Naren took the camera and made a panoramic shot to capture the extent of the ecosystem's flourishing. They didn't see the mysterious plant and headed back to the submarine. They made it out into the ocean just in time. Right then, 3 beluga whales were swimming by them. Each one of them was bigger than their submarine. Their smooth, silky skin looked like ivory. They swam by, paying no attention to the submarine, and disappeared into the blue depths. Michelle and her assistants set off for the next biosphere on their list. Basically, they passed by the newly built domes with replicas of Polynesia and New Zealand. Michelle looked down as they passed under the dome covering a tropical island. Sandy beaches had been constructed along the island shore. Between the edge of the dome and the beach, there was a thin strip of water where seagulls and other seabirds circled overhead. Under the next dome, which was still unfinished, Michelle saw the half-built city of Auckland. A crane inside the bubble was lowering large wooden panels onto the dock, where workers were putting them into place. Beyond the dock, unfinished office buildings and green hills with grazing sheep could be seen. Finally, their next destination came into view. They entered the airlock once again, waited for the water to drain, stepped inside, and found themselves surrounded by lush green foliage. As they made their way through the thickets, the piercing chirping of cicadas could be heard from somewhere above. After making their way out of the jungle, they emerged onto a beach. An archipelago of rocky islands with trees on the very tops of the cliffs had been created in the artificial sea. "This place looks like the island my parents are from," Nurin remarked as he picked up the camera again and took a picture. Smiling, he started to take off his shoes, and Michelle and Yakub followed his lead. The beach was crowded with vacationers from nearby Cremonis. They were sunbathing under artificial sunlight that didn't contain any harmful ultraviolet rays. The three of them walked barefoot along the beach, passing tourists and an old catamaran tied to a coconut palm. "Guys, do you see any signs of life?" Michelle asked her companions. "Yeah, looks like we found something," Nurin replied with a laugh. Michelle turned around and saw a monkey with coarse gray fur climbing up Yakub's leg. He climbed onto his shoulder and let out a funny squeal. "I meant plant life," Michelle smiled. "Any signs of our mysterious plant?" They continued exploring the beach, took a few more soil samples, and examined the plants. Yakub shook a banana tree, and a bunch of yellow fruit fell from a branch. Michelle peeled a banana and took a bite of the soft, sweet flesh. It was obvious that this biosphere was also thriving, but there was no sign of that mysterious plant here. They returned to the submarine and continued on their way. Under the next unfinished dome they passed, rice fields stretched out. Men and women in triangular hats walked along the sticky soil beside long rows, gathering rice stalks into bundles. Along the edge of the dome, they saw hills covered with white and yellow flowers, gently swaying in the wind. Michelle slowed down to admire the next biosphere, most of which was made up of lakes. The water was so clear and smooth that the rocky bottom was easily visible through it. The edges of the lakes were overgrown with lily pads and purple lotus flowers, which were reflected in the still water. In the middle of the lake stood a temple with a huge golden statue of Buddha. Michelle imagined the fresh scent of moist air inside this biosphere. They passed by other biospheres with beautiful Asian landscapes. There were long rows of blooming trees from northern Japan, bamboo forests of central China, and small desert landscapes of the Middle East. Now they reached the biospheres with replicas of various corners of Europe. Right here, they gazed upon the majestic, snow-covered Swiss Alps, where many long-haired mountain goats were peacefully grazing along the steep, rocky slopes. Then they slowly passed by the towering limestone cliffs and ancient fortresses located on the scenic outskirts of tiny Mediterranean Malta. And they floated past a small Austrian village on the shore of a crystal-clear lake. On their way, they came across a biosphere with small Greek islands and rocky cliffs dotted with blue and white houses. The houses seemed empty, but Neshel imagined children running along the winding paths on the cliffs, tossing pebbles into the ocean and racing each other down. The next group of biospheres was Neshel's favorite. They contained landscapes from the entire African continent, from its southernmost shore to the northern coast of Tunisia, stretching about 8,000 kilometers in total. Despite the vast size of the African continent, here, underwater, all these ecosystems could be seen in less than an hour. This was the place that most closely resembled the homeland of Neshel's parents. Their next stop was a biosphere with the grassy plains of Kenya. Neshel could feel the heat of the dry air on her skin as she looked at the field of tall golden grass stretching across the entire width of the dome. Elephants and giraffes roamed the savanna, nibbling on the branches of umbrella-shaped pines. A thick, muddy river ran slowly through the entire area, where several large hippos sat lazily yawning in the sun. Neshel carefully took a detailed soil sample from the bank, while Naren, meanwhile, continuously snapped the camera shutter, photographing the lush surroundings to thoroughly document every aspect of their important mission. They slowly walked back through the thick, tall grass toward their waiting submarine as the majestic elephants in the far distance trumpeted their loud afternoon song for all to hear. There was no sign of the mysterious plant here either. They continued on past other biospheres with landscapes of the African continent. Under one of the domes, the underwater Mount Kilimanjaro rose up with its flat, snow-covered summit. Under another dome, a beautiful waterfall roared, cascading from a rocky ledge into a turbulent river beneath the canopy of trees leaning over the water. Moving on, they passed a dome they couldn't see inside. The glass was covered with frost, and a stream of bubbles flowed from a generator at the edge of the dome into the ocean. The submarine entered the airlock, and the passengers put on warm jackets and scarves. As she entered, Neshel took small steps to avoid slipping on the ice. The air here was as dry as in the Kenyan biosphere, but the temperature was below zero. Breathing in the frosty air, Neshel felt a sense of calm. Her warm breath looked like little clouds that floated upward and vanished without a trace. Finding that plant here was highly unlikely, but this was one of the few biospheres Neshel had not yet visited. In the distance, snowy icebergs drifted across the dark blue waters. The snow lying all around muffled every sound. Sometimes, only the dull rumble of moving ice floes and the voices of little penguins could be heard. The closer the members of the Underwater Horizon Special Unit got to the colony of birds in black tuxedos, the clearer their cries became. These birds were not afraid of people at all. The penguins were so carefree that even if Neshel reached out and touched them, they wouldn't pay her any attention. Unlike their ancestors, these birds were not bothered by blizzards, snowstorms, or any of the harshest weather conditions on Earth. They lived peacefully and comfortably, knowing that the weather would not change. Neshel took a few feather samples for laboratory analysis and a piece of ice to check for microorganisms. Then our trio continued on their way, approaching the supposed location of the mysterious plant on the outskirts of the city. They passed by the beautiful stepped cliffs of Machu Picchu. The artificial sunlight inside the dome dimmed, just like at a real sunset, gilding the ruins of the Inca city among the mountain peaks. The mountain peaks were shrouded in clouds of mist, which filled the biosphere with moisture. The submarine made its penultimate stop in the lush jungles of the Amazon. After stepping through the airlock, the travelers had to make their way through thick, low-hanging vines and dense tree branches. A few seconds later, they emerged onto a path made of packed wood chips. The air here was heavy and humid, and a sheen of sweat appeared on Nichelle's hands. A bright orange animal darted above them and stopped to look at the newcomers. It was a tamarin, a small monkey that looked like a lion. Soon, 3 more curious tamarins joined it. They studied the people closely, then disappeared into the forest. The animals made loud, drawn-out sounds as they skillfully swung from branch to branch. While examining one of the trees, Nichelle spotted a small green frog on a leaf. The semi-transparent little creature was almost invisible, blending in with the palm leaves. Nichelle only noticed it when it blanked. She collected a few leaves and soil samples from the jungle, and the travelers returned to their submarine. The underwater domes became less frequent until they reached the biospheres with North American landscapes. Nichelle looked down and saw a large canyon surrounded by reddish cliffs with vultures circling high in the sky. Sequoia forests with trees so massive that roads had been built right through their trunks. A tiny fishing village made up of a dozen houses and a pyramid of lobster traps stacked on the dock. The submarine hovered above a dome covering northern Canada, with its tundra thickly overgrown with frozen blackberry bushes. Nichelle looked through the glass at a herd of caribou grazing on the snow-covered grass. Ahead was the last biosphere. It lay beyond the farthest dome, covering the northern part of Baffin Island. Nichelle turned the submarine's headlights up to maximum brightness. Finally, they saw the last dome, gleaming in the beam of their spotlights. Beneath it was an experiment that surpassed all the others. This biosphere was not a copy of any single Earth landscape. It included elements from every continent on Earth. White sandy beaches at the edge of the sphere were surrounded by a ring of palm trees. In a narrow strip of water around the dome's perimeter, rocky islands rose up, overgrown with tall dragon trees, which in the terrestrial world grow only on the Socotra archipelago in Yemen. Most of the land beyond the water strip was covered by a pine forest. The passengers left the submarine and headed into the forest, filled with coolness and the refreshing scent of pine needles. For several minutes, they walked along a path covered with pine needles. Then Nichelle noticed some kind of shimmering ahead. When they stepped out into a clearing, Nichelle couldn't believe her eyes. The mysterious plant they were searching for towered above the trees, stretching its branches with spiky leaves several meters in every direction. Its leaves, just like the fragment the captain had shown her, shimmered with rainbow colors and changed hues every second right before her eyes. Nichelle walked up to the plant and broke off a small piece from one of its leaves. At that moment, Naren took several photos, quickly clicking the camera shutter. A thick sap began to ooze from the break in the leaf. Nichelle collected it in her cupped hand and placed it in a small bag for further analysis. But as she was taking a sample, a drop of sap landed on a cut on her hand from a recent accidental scrape. The cut disappeared completely the moment it came into contact with the plant's sap. The plant turned out to be medicinal, and its properties could change the lives of the inhabitants of Cremenis and possibly people all over the world. Now, their mission could be considered a success. It was time to head home and begin studying this promising medicinal plant. Nichelle started the engines and went full speed ahead, leaving a trail of bubbles behind her. They returned to Cremenes the same way they had set out. They passed through all the biospheres and, retracing their morning route through the city, arrived at the central office of the Underwater Horizon. Nichelle took the collected samples to the lab so the scientists could analyze them in the morning and waved goodbye to her two assistants. She headed home the long way, along the river from Seoul to Chicago. The warm light of the artificial sunset reflected in the calm river water and softly illuminated the houses along the banks. She walked slowly, watching as evening settled in. When the artificial light faded completely, luminescent fish became visible on the outside of the dome, looking like millions of moving stars in the night sky. At home, Nichelle took a shower, had dinner, and went to bed, gazing at the fish through the window in the ceiling of her bedroom. She imagined those beautiful places in the world above water that she would definitely visit someday. The jungles of Indonesia, the plains of Africa, and the islands of the Caribbean Sea. She took a deep breath and exhaled slowly. Within a few seconds, Nichelle was already fast asleep. And with that, our story comes to an end. Good night and sweet dreams.
If it wasn't Jesus, tell me where I for day. Tell me who I for be. Reminisce those days. 247 in the street. I know seafood chop. I know even belly full. Sapa depression was hitting hard. Devil whispering, commit suicide. Okay, pause. Let me take a break and tell you how Jehovah changed the game. Enlisted in the Christ army. I'm a new breed. Christ they speak through me. Shade they free me before. Share now you where they doubt me. Oh shit. New level. I'm a living king. The name Zadok is a prophecy. Few years and still counting. I'm a legendary. I'm on my way up, none can stop me. My prayer request, so God help me. He got you, fuck you, every day. Come, got you, yeah, 247. Remember, he got you, fuck you. Every day, come, got you, yeah. Papa God there for me, should be him there for you. He's not gonna leave me, he's not gonna leave you. Papa God there for me, should be him there for you. He's not gonna leave me, he's not gonna leave you. Check back then, my life was a mess. Strive so hard so I could be the best. Always hungry for success. All on God, cause now him be my access. 3 step up and I ain't going less. Tryna take a break but my feet keep pedaling. I'm a veteran, more like a reverend. So I share the world with the brethren. Non-stop through the ups and downs. I ain't gonna give up. Back since when I was young, so can now I big up. Level up. Look me to do, I'm see I gotta be God. He got you, fuck you, every day. Come, got you, yeah, 247. Remember, he got you, fuck you, every day. Come, got you, yeah. Papa God there for me, should be him there for you. He's not gonna leave me, he's not gonna leave you. Papa God there for me. Should be him there for you. He's not gonna leave me. He's not gonna leave you.